Hi there, my name is Stefan Skripak, and this is DisneylandToyFactory.com. DisneylandToyFactory.com is a two-part project. It's made up of a website as well as an ongoing 3D printing experiment. Through cyclical 3D scanning and then 3D printing of a Mickey Mouse figure produced by a Disney-branded Mold-A-Rama machine, I'm producing more interesting, more compelling figurines, which I then advertise on the accompanying website. Throughout my time as an ITP student, I've been using technology, technological tools, techniques, design elements in ways that are contrary to their rigid digital nature. So often this manifests in organic forms, in natural forms, specifically as a way of trying to soften what I would call the edge of technology. More recently, this has manifested in experiments trying to find beauty in facilitated unpredictability using physical, non-technical materials, so things like cement or ice. And then a further extension of this was my project called Athena's Lament. And in working on Athena's Lament is when I started reading and thinking about the aesthetics of glitch and unpredictable digital processes. My thesis challenge sort of came out of all of these often conflicting ideas. That challenge to myself was to try and harness and embrace rather than suppress and ignore the imperfections and unpredictabilities in digital fabrication, with the goal of trying to make something that's both aesthetically compelling but also inspires understanding and empathy for our technology. In pursuit of a better understanding of these ideas, I took inspiration from the work of Gabriele Menotti and Matthew Plummer Fernandez. And the writers Hito Steyerl, Rosa Mankman, and Laura Devendorf all discuss the ways that breakdowns in the seamlessness of digital art practices are actually avenues for new, more significant meaning. But more than any other source, I found the writings of Claudia Hart to really crystallize my thoughts on this topic. Claudia Hart wrote, "We artists tend to want to wreak havoc on consumer products, to rethink possibilities. I want to fuck up consumer products. They are useless in a banal, empty way. I want to make art which I think of as a more profound, useless object. In my world, opposition to the corporate is the introduction of expressiveness through imperfection." What this quote and the rest of Hart's writing revealed to me is that artistic meaning can come not just from the imperfection itself, but also the image onto which that imperfection is applied, specifically when that image is a commercial, empty one, like she discusses. I then found the perfect implementation of this extra layer of social critique when a classmate of mine, Noah, introduced me to a device called the Mold-A-Rama, and specifically a Disney-branded version of it called the Disneyland Toy Factory. The Disneyland Toy Factory was a briefly popular vending machine type device that used automated injection molding to make Disney-branded figurines for tourists at fairs and zoos. What I really love about this machine is that it sort of has this proto-digital fabrication feel to it. But more importantly, the image of Mickey Mouse in this context offers a specific double-layered meaning. Because his image is such an iconic symbol of American consumers' culture, Mickey's likeness has become ubiquitous in pop art and art toys. But this commercial artwork is often so polished and consumerist in and of itself that it offers no more cultural critique than the non-appropriated Disney images. So by actually fucking up Mickey Mouse, as Claudia Hart would say, I'm subverting empty consumption as represented both by the Disney oligarchy as well as the art made with Mickey's image that's just as empty. As I said before, the main component of this project is a cyclical 3D printing and scanning process that, at least very generally, is hypothetically lossless. When I started experimenting with this idea, initially what I did was push the various settings of the 3D printer to their extreme. So things like layer height, extrusion amount, speed of printing, and I did end up with some really interesting results. But throughout this process, I had this nagging feeling that there was something inauthentic about deliberately using, the quote-unquote wrong settings. And this feeling was really clarified for me when I read a specific quote by Rosa Mankman from her Glitch Studies manifesto. To design a glitch means to domesticate it. When the glitch becomes domesticated, controlled by a tool or technology, it has lost its enchantment and has become predictable. What I was doing was deliberately tailoring the glitch by intentionally choosing these extreme settings, rather than allowing the genuine process to mediate the outcome. So what I decided at that point was that no matter what I ultimately ended up doing, I really needed to allow the machines to work as they were designed and allow the imperfections to come out of that naturally, which, as I learned from these tests, they do in basically every step of the final process. The first step starts with a Mickey Mouse figure produced by Disneyland Toy Factory machine. It's actually this figure right here. This figure is then scanned on a Morobo Atlas 3D scanner. And the scanner, as it turns out, struggles with certain shapes, especially things like protrusions. And as a result, produces 3D point clouds that tend to have distortions or holes in them. The next step is that this point cloud is brought into a software called MeshLab. And in MeshLab, the point cloud is then cleaned up slightly, and then using an algorithm called Poisson surface reconstruction is wrapped to turn it into a watertight mesh object. While this algorithm does the best it can with the imperfect point cloud, it inevitably ends up taking some liberties that leads to further deformations of the object. Then the final step of this process is printing this watertight mesh on the Monoprice Delta Mini printer. That's this printer right here. The thing about 3D printing, especially when printing in the default settings like I've been using, is that even with a perfect mesh, which with this project I rarely have, you would still end up with very visible striations and occasional 3D printing failures that would contribute even further to the glitching of the figure. This is everything involved in one step of this cyclical process, but crucially the most compelling change happens because this process is repeated over and over again. Using the Mickey Mouse iconography felt like a strong statement in itself, but I really wanted to emphasize the critique I mentioned earlier of the void of critical meaning found in both Disney imagery as well as the commercial art that co-ops it. And this is why I ultimately developed the concept for the accompanying website, DisneylandToyFactory.com. The website is a satirical imitation of the original Toy Factory. The main page of the website advertises in simple, vague terms the product Mold-A-Rama Mickey, and claims that advancements in 3D printing have allowed for not only on-demand but also totally unique figures for every consumer. In reality, each figure is actually just the latest in the cyclical 3D printing process, packaged to look like a blind box collectible or designer toy. By putting this subversive concept in these specific consumerist terms, I'm myself co-opting the polish used by both Disney as well as the commercial artists who uncritically use its imagery. And as a result, this becomes a stealthy way of bringing non-traditional art objects to a wider audience by advertising the cultural value of these sculptures using consumerist language. There are a few clear next steps for me with this project. The first one, obviously, is to get DisneylandToyFactory.com actually up and running on the internet, because it currently only exists in the form of design wireframes. Also, I actually had plans to build my own physical vending machine device based on 3D printing and scanning rather than injection molding, but these plans were unfortunately derailed by COVID-19 shutdowns. I definitely intend on returning to that idea when it's finally possible. More broadly, I also intend to definitely continue experimenting with digital fabrication tools and techniques, as well as with glitch and glitch aesthetic, because as I've found during this process, they are both very crucial to my creative practice.